They called him Black Horse, the deadliest Apache warrior the Arizona Territory had ever known, a ghost in the wilderness who could kill a man 100 different ways and disappear like smoke in the wind. His name alone made hardened frontiersmen wake in cold sweat. But on a scorching summer day in 1870, this feared warrior found something that would shake his world to its core. A white woman, half dead in the merciless desert, abandoned by her own people after disease claimed her family. What happened next would become a legend. Against every tribal law and tradition, Black Horse did the unthinkable. He took her as his wife. This isn't just a love story. This is the tale of how the most feared Apache warrior and a desperate white widow defied two worlds and changed the frontier forever. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's episode will reveal the moment that sealed their fate. The fever came like a thief in the night. Sarah Mitchell watched helplessly as it stole first her father's strength, then her mother's breath, and finally her young brother's life. Each rasping cough echoed through their modest cabin like a death knell, each drop of sweat on burning foreheads another countdown to the inevitable. She hadn't slept in 4 days, watching the disease consume her family one by one, turning their skin yellow as prairie grass in autumn. "Keep the Bible," her mother had whispered, pressing the worn, leather-bound book into Sarah's trembling hands. "Remember who you are." Those were her last words before her eyes glazed over, fixed on something beyond this world. Sarah clutched the family Bible to her chest, its pages softened by generations of prayers and tear-stained revelations, watching as the last person who truly loved her slipped away into eternal silence. She buried them alone. The neighbors she'd known since childhood, the friends who'd shared her table and borrowed her flour, they all stayed away. Fear of the fever was stronger than Christian charity. Her hands bled from digging in the hard earth, but she barely felt the pain. Physical suffering meant nothing compared to the hollow ache in her chest. That night, as she sat alone in the cabin that suddenly felt too big and too empty, they came. Thomas Jenkins and his wife Martha, the Wilsons from the next farm over, and 3 other families she'd broken bread with countless times. They wore sympathy on their faces like cheap masks, but their eyes gleamed with something else entirely. "It ain't right for a woman to be alone out here," Thomas said, his voice dripping with false concern. "We've taken up a collection, enough to get you back east to your cousins." Sarah knew she had no cousins back east. Her entire family had come, west together, chasing dreams of open sky and fertile soil. Before she could protest, they were already dividing up her life like vultures. The Wilsons claimed her father's tools and plough horse, payment for old debts she'd never heard of. Martha Jenkins helped herself to her mother's china and quilts, claiming they'd fetch a good price to fund Sarah's journey. Even her food stores vanished into greedy hands. By dawn, they'd stripped her world bare. All that remained was her mother's Bible, a few days' worth of dried meat, and the clothes on her back. They left her with empty promises of returning with a wagon to take her east. But Sarah saw the truth in their averted eyes. They were leaving her to die, far enough from civilization that their consciences wouldn't be troubled by her fate. She stood in the doorway of her emptied home, watching. Dust clouds rise from their departing wagons. The morning sun cast long shadows across the yard where she'd played as a child, where her mother had planted flowers that would now wither and die. Her father's half-finished fence stood as a testament to dreams cut short, his tools now in the hands of thieves who called themselves neighbors. The Bible's weight in her hands anchored her to reality. Opening it with trembling fingers, she traced the familiar handwriting recording births, deaths, and marriages. 4 generations of Mitchells had lived, loved, and died within these pages. Now she was the last, standing alone at the edge of the world with nothing but their memories and her own fierce will to survive. "I will not die here," she whispered to the empty air, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I will not give them the satisfaction." She had no idea that her declaration would echo through time, that her story would become legend. She didn't know that somewhere out there, a warrior called Black Horse was riding the boundaries of his territory, and that fate was already drawing their paths together like iron to a lodestone. Sarah Mitchell took one last look at the cabin that had been her home, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the wilderness. She had no way of knowing that this moment, this desperate, terrifying moment, was actually the beginning of something extraordinary. Something that would change not just her life, but the very fabric of the frontier itself. The Arizona sun was a merciless executioner. By midday of her third day in the wilderness, Sarah's lips had cracked like dried riverbeds, her tongue swollen and useless in her parched mouth. The few sips remaining in her water skin had grown hot enough to scald, but she forced herself to ration them, one precious drop at a time. Each step felt like walking through molten lead. Her world had shrunk to the broken wagon wheel she'd found half buried in the sand, the only shelter for miles in this God-forgiving desert. She'd dragged it upright, propping it against a sun-bleached boulder to create a sliver of shade barely wide enough for her shoulders. Now she huddled there, watching her shadow shrink as the sun climbed higher, knowing that when it disappeared completely, she'd have to move or die where she sat. The Bible lay open in her lap, its pages fluttering in the hot wind like dying birds' wings. She'd tried reading Psalms for comfort, but the words blurred and danced before her eyes. Instead, she traced her fingers over her mother's handwriting, letting the familiar loops and curves anchor her to consciousness. "The Lord is my shepherd," she whispered, her voice as rough as sandpaper. "I shall not want—" A rattlesnake's warning buzz sent ice through her veins, despite the heat. The creature had emerged from beneath a nearby rock, its scales gleaming like newly minted coins in the sunlight. Sarah watched it, too exhausted to feel proper fear. The snake's eyes seemed to mock her, as if saying, "This is my domain, Pale. Evase. You don't belong here." She didn't belong here, but neither had she belonged in that cabin after everyone she loved had died. Perhaps she belonged nowhere now. The dried meat was gone, and her stomach had stopped growling days ago. Now it just ached, a hollow pain that matched the emptiness in her chest. She'd tried eating prickly pear fruit, like she'd seen Mexican traders do, but her clumsy attempts had left her hands full of tiny thorns. They throbbed with every heartbeat, adding their voice to the chorus of her body's complaints. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in colors so beautiful they hurt her eyes, Sarah saw something that made her heart stop. Tracks in the sand, half hidden by the evening shadows. Not the wandering paths of desert creatures, but the deliberate prints of unshod horses. Apache. The stories she'd heard around settler campfires came rushing back. Tales of ruthless warriors who appeared like ghosts and vanished like smoke, leaving only death in their wake. They said an Apache warrior could track a mouse across bare rock, could survive for weeks on nothing but what the desert provided. They said the most feared among them was a shadow that rode a black horse. A demon who'd never lost a battle, she should have been terrified. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. If death was coming, let it come quickly. Better a warrior's arrow than this slow baking under an indifferent sun. But something deeper than fear or resignation stirred in her chest, something that had been born in the ashes of her family's death and tempered in the betrayal of her neighbors. Survival, raw, animal determination to keep breathing, keep moving, keep fighting until there wasn't a single breath left in her body. Using the wagon wheel for support, Sarah forced herself to her feet. The world swam around her, but she remained standing. The tracks led west toward the distant mountains that shimmered like a mirage in the dying light. Where there were riders, there must be water. She took one step, then another. The Bible she tucked into the rough sack that held her few remaining possessions. Its weight against her back was both burden and comfort as she stumbled forward. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere, in the gathering darkness, unseen eyes watched her desperate progress. Black Horse sat motionless atop a ridge, his face unreadable as stone as he observed the white woman's halting journey. He'd been tracking her for 2 days, watching her struggle against the desert's attempts to kill her. By all rights, he should have let nature take its course, or if mercy moved him, ended her suffering with a single arrow. Instead, he waited, watching her fight for every step with a determination that stirred something unexpected in his warrior's heart. This woman had the spirit of a mountain lion, wounded, cornered, but refusing to lay down and die. Perhaps that's why he hadn't killed her yet. Perhaps that's why fate had brought them both to this moment, though neither of them knew it yet. Black Horse moved like a shadow across the desert landscape, every motion deliberate and deadly. His medicine pouch, heavy with sacred stones that had witnessed 100 battles, thumped softly against his chest with each step. 27 winters had passed since his first kill, 36 since his birth under a blood moon, a sign the elders said marked him for greatness and violence in equal measure. The stories they told of him around settler campfires weren't stories at all, but memories that woke their children screaming. He'd earned every whispered tale, paid for his reputation in blood and fire. When the bluecoats came hunting Apache scalps, Black Horse taught them why men fear the dark. When rival tribes tested his people's boundaries, he sent their warriors, home with scars they'd never forget. The desert itself seemed to bow to his will, revealing secrets to him that it kept hidden from lesser men. His fingers traced the eagle feather tied into his hair, a gift from his dying father, who'd named him for the midnight stallion he'd tamed as a boy. "Their black horse runs between 2 worlds," the old man had said. "Neither day nor night can claim him." At the time, Black Horse hadn't understood. Now, watching the white woman stumble through his territory, those words echoed in his mind like distant thunder. She should have been dead 3 times over. The fever that took her family should have claimed her too. The desert should have stolen her last breath days ago. Even now, dehydrated and lost, she refused to lie down and accept her fate. There was power in that kind of defiance. The same fierce spirit he recognized in himself. The other warriors had noticed her trail 2 days ago. A white woman, alone, they'd laughed. The desert will save us the trouble. But Black Horse had silenced them with a look. Something about her solitary struggle demanded his personal attention. He'd tracked her himself, watching as she fought the sun with nothing but determination, and that strange book she clutched like a lifeline. From his vantage point high on the ridge, he watched her now through eyes that had spotted eagle feathers. At 1,000 paces, her dress, once fine enough for Sunday church, hung in tatters. Her skin had turned angry red where the sun had punished it, and her movements were those of someone walking the knife edge between life and death. Yet there was a grace in her suffering, a dignity that even impending death couldn't strip away. He touched the stones in his medicine pouch, feeling their ancient power thrumming against his palm. Each one held a memory, his first buffalo hunt, his vision quest, the day he became war chief. The spirits had guided him true through every battle and raid, but now they whispered something different, something that made his warrior's heart beat with unfamiliar rhythm. A hawk screamed overhead, and Black Horse read the signs in its flight. The spirits were speaking, though their message was clouded. This woman's presence in his territory was no accident. The desert had led her here for a purpose, just as it had led him to witness her desperate journey. His horse, black as a starless night, shifted restlessly beneath him. The animal sensed its master's unusual hesitation. Never before had Black Horse waited so long to decide a trespasser's fate. One signal from him would end this strange vigil. A single arrow, a quick death, more mercy than most whites could expect in Apache territory. Instead, he watched. The sun began to sink, painting the desert in colors no white man had words for. Soon the cold would come, bitter as a spurned lover's curse. The woman stumbled again, caught herself, forced another step. Blood stained her tracks now. Her feet were leaving pieces of themselves on the merciless ground. Black Horse felt the weight of destiny settling around his shoulders like a heavy winter blanket. The spirits had shown him many paths in his life, led him to victories that would be sung about for generations. But this moment felt different. This decision would change more than just his own fate. He touched the wolf fang that hung at his throat, his most powerful protection charm. The legends his people told spoke of warriors who had violated tribal law for the sake of destiny. Their names were whispered around fires as either cautionary tales or epic victories, with nothing in between. There was no middle ground for such choices. The woman fell again. This time, she didn't get up. Death, Sarah decided, felt like burning ice. Her body shivered violently even as the desert heat scorched her skin. The ground beneath her cheek was still warm from the day's sun, but she couldn't stop trembling. Strange shapes danced at the edges of her vision. Perhaps the angels her mother had promised would guide them home. The sound reached her first, the soft thud of unshod hooves on sand. Then a shadow fell across her face, blocking out the first stars of evening. Sarah forced her eyes to focus, and her heart stopped. He sat astride a horse as black as midnight, a warrior straight from her darkest nightmares. Countless coup feathers adorned his hair, each one representing a victory in battle. Scars marked his chest like a map of violence. But it was his eyes that trapped her. Dark, fierce, and impossibly ancient, as if they held all the mysteries of this savage land within them. In one fluid motion, he dismounted. Sarah tried to move, to crawl away, to fight, but her body had finally betrayed her. She could only watch as he approached, his steps silent as a hunting cat's. He carried a water skin made of deer hide, worn smooth by years of use. The sight of it made her parched throat constrict painfully. "If you're going to kill me," she whispered through cracked lips, "be quick about it." The warrior's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those bottomless eyes. He knelt beside her, and Sarah smelled leather, horse, and desert sage. With movements that seemed impossibly gentle for hands that had known so much violence, he lifted her head and pressed the water skin to her lips. The first drop of water felt like life itself flooding back into her body. She wanted to gulp it, desperately, but his strong hands controlled the flow, preventing her from drinking too quickly. When he finally pulled the water skin away, Sarah felt tears cutting trails through the dust on her cheeks. "Why?" she managed to ask. He said nothing, but reached down and lifted her as easily as if she were a child. The world spun dizzyingly around her as he placed her on his horse. His hands were calloused but careful, positioning her securely before mounting behind her. The horse's warmth seeped into her bones, and she felt consciousness slipping away. Again, the last thing Sarah registered was the warrior's arm around her waist, solid as iron, holding her steady as they began to move through the gathering darkness. She should have been terrified. This man was everything she'd been taught to. Fear. Instead, she felt something impossible. Safe. Black Horse felt the exact moment the woman's body went limp against him. He adjusted his grip, keeping her secure as his horse picked its way through the desert night. The decision had been made. The instant he saw her fall, the spirits had placed her in his path for a reason, and he would not ignore their will. But as he rode through his territory with this white woman in his arms, Black Horse felt the weight of taboo pressing down on him like a physical thing. No Apache warrior had ever taken a white woman into the tribe, not to keep, not to protect. To do so was to invite the anger of both worlds down upon his head. Yet something about her refused to let him ride away. Perhaps it was the way she'd faced death without begging or weeping. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity she'd maintained even as the desert tried to strip it from her. Or perhaps it was something deeper, something that spoke to the part of him that had always stood apart, even among his own people. The water skin bounced lightly against his leg as they rode. now half empty from saving her life. It was an old thing given to him by his mother before her death. She had told him it would show him the way when his path seemed darkest. At the time, he'd thought she meant it would help him find water in the desert. Now he wondered if she'd seen something. More, ahead lay the Apache camp, and with it, a decision that would change everything. His people would expect him to either kill her or ransom her back to the whites. Instead, he was about to do something unprecedented. The thought should have troubled him more than it did. The woman stirred slightly in his arms, muttering something in her fever dreams. Without thinking, Black Horse tightened his hold, offering what comfort he could. In that simple gesture, he felt the future shifting like sand in a storm. There would be no turning back from this path once he took it. His horse seemed to sense his thoughts, picking up speed as if eager to reach whatever destiny awaited them. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent to the drama unfolding beneath them. But Black Horse felt their weight like countless eyes, watching to see what would happen when the most feared Apache warrior brought home the one thing he'd never been expected to capture: hope. Dawn broke over the desert like shattered glass, sharp edges of light cutting through the night's remaining shadows. Sarah drifted between consciousness and fever dreams, aware only of the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the iron-strong arm that held her upright. Every breath brought the scent of leather, sage, and something wild, the essence of the warrior who had become her unlikely savior. Black Horse felt the woman's fever burning through her skin like a brand. They needed to stop. She wouldn't survive another day of riding in this condition. His eyes scanned the terrain with predatory precision until he found what he sought: a hidden canyon where ancient ones had once made their homes. Here they would make their stand against death. He eased her down from the horse, feeling how light she had become, as if the desert had already begun to consume her. Her skin was fire-hot, her breathing shallow, as he laid her in the shade of a towering rock wall. Her eyes fluttered open, fever-bright but surprisingly lucid. "You should have left me to die," she whispered in English. Black Horse understood more of the white man's tongue than he let on, but he chose to respond in Apache, his voice deep and measured. "The spirits did not guide me to you for death." He pulled something from a bundle tied to his saddle, a pair of moccasins crafted by his sister's hands. They were meant as a gift for a future bride, but now they would serve a different purpose. Sarah watched through half-closed eyes as he gently lifted her feet, examining the bloody ruins the desert had made of them. His touch was surprisingly gentle for hands that had known so much violence. She bit back a cry as he began cleaning the wounds with water from his skin, then applying a poultice of crushed desert plants. "Why?" she asked again, the question that had haunted her since he first appeared, like a spirit in the desert. This time, he met her eyes. In that moment, something passed between them, something that transcended language and the blood-soaked history. Between their peoples, he saw not a white woman, but a soul as fierce as any warrior's. She saw not the savage from settler nightmares, but a man whose honor ran as deep as the desert itself. The moccasins slipped onto her feet like they had been made for her. Black Horse's hands lingered a moment longer than necessary, and Sarah felt a jolt of something that had nothing to do with fever. He turned away abruptly, moving to secure their perimeter with the precision of a lifetime of survival. As the day wore on, Sarah's fever began to break under his care. He brought her small sips of water and bits of dried meat, watching with approval as strength slowly returned to her limbs. When she tried to stand, he was there, supporting her without making her feel weak. When she stumbled, his hands caught her with unfailing certainty. Night fell again, bringing with it a cold that cut to the bone. Without ceremony, Black Horse wrapped his own blanket around her shoulders, then built a small fire in a way that hid its light from prying eyes. The flames cast dancing shadows on the canyon walls, like ancient spirits watching their unlikely communion. "My name is Sarah," she said softly. testing the weight of trust between them. He nodded once, acknowledging the gift of her name. "Black Horse," he responded, the English words feeling strange on his tongue. It was the first time he had spoken, his name to a white person without the prelude of battle cries. The night deepened around them, stars wheeling overhead in their eternal dance. Sarah found herself studying his profile in the firelight, the proud line of his nose, the set of his jaw that spoke of unshakable determination. He was everything she had been taught to fear, and yet Black Horse felt her gaze but did not turn. His thoughts were as turbulent as storm clouds. Every law of his people, every hard-learned lesson of survival told him this was folly. To show mercy to the enemy was weakness. To feel anything for them was death. Yet something deeper than tribal law pulled at him, something that whispered of destiny and paths not yet walked. A coyote's cry echoed through the canyon, and Sarah instinctively moved closer to the fire, closer to him. The space between them crackled with unspoken possibilities. They were two worlds meeting in the person of two outcasts, a warrior who had chosen mercy over law, and a woman who had found strength in losing everything. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. The Apache camp lay ahead, and with it, challenges that would test them both to their limits. But for now, in this hidden canyon under the desert stars, something new was being born, something that would shake the very foundations of the frontier itself. The Apache camp appeared like a mirage in the pre-dawn light, materializing out of the desert shadows as if conjured by ancient magic. Sarah felt Black Horse's body tense. Against her back, his warrior's instincts alive to the danger of this moment. The camp's dogs had already caught their scent, their barking sharp as gunfire in the morning stillness. Warriors emerged from their lodges like spirits rising from the earth, hands gripping weapons with deadly purpose. Their faces turned to stone when they saw who their war chief carried. Black Horse had not just returned with a white woman. He had brought her mounted on his own horse, a position of honor that made his intentions clear to all. A ceremonial blanket hung outside the medicine man's lodge, its intricate patterns telling stories of power and prophecy. The old man himself stood before it now, his eyes sharp as hawk's talons as he watched their approach. Running Bear, they called him, and his word could make or break this fragile moment. Black Horse dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to help Sarah down. His hands lingered at her waist a heartbeat longer than necessary, a gesture not lost on the watching tribe. She stood on trembling legs, the moccasins he'd given her marking her first step between worlds. "You bring death." "To our camp, Black Horse," Running Bear's voice cracked like distant thunder. "The white woman's people will come hunting her. Let them come." Black Horse's reply cut through the morning air like a war lance. "They abandoned her to the desert's judgment. The desert gave her to me." A murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, their eyes wide at the sight of the pale-faced woman. Warriors gripped their weapons tighter, generations of bloodshed and betrayal making their fingers itch for action. Sarah felt the weight of 100 hostile stares, but she forced herself to stand straight. She had not survived fever, betrayal, and the merciless desert to cower now. Her eyes met Running Bear's unflinching gaze, and in that moment something passed between them, a recognition of strength that transcended the barriers of race and hatred. The medicine man moved forward, his ceremonial staff striking the earth with each step. The blanket behind him seemed to ripple with power, its patterns shifting in the growing light like living things. He circled Sarah slowly, reading the signs that only his ancient wisdom could interpret. "She walks with death," he declared finally, his voice carrying to every corner of the camp, but not as its victim. "Death fears her." His weathered hand reached out, touching the spot above her heart. "The spirits whisper her name. They say she is meant to be here." Black Horse's hand had never left the small of her back, a touch that anchored her to this moment, to this impossible reality. Now he stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority that no warrior would dare challenge. "She is under my protection. Any hand raised against her strikes at me." The words hung in the air like smoke from a signal fire. Every person in the camp understood their weight. Black Horse had never taken a wife, had never shown interest in any woman, Apache or otherwise. His dedication to warfare was legendary. Now he stood ready to kill for a white woman, to die for her if necessary. Running Bear lifted his staff, and the blanket behind him caught the first real rays of sunrise, its colors blazing like fire. "The spirits have spoken through signs and dreams," he announced. "Black Horse brings us not an enemy, but a bridge between worlds. She will stay." The tension in the camp broke like a fever. Women began to move forward, curiosity overcoming caution. Children darted closer, reaching out to touch Sarah's strange clothes before being pulled back by their mothers. Warriors lowered their weapons, though their eyes remained wary. An old woman approached, carrying something in her gnarled hands. Another blanket, this one smaller, but no less significant. Without a word, she draped it around Sarah's shoulders. The gesture was clear to all. She was being claimed by the tribe, marked for protection. But as the camp slowly returned to its morning routines, Sarah felt the weight of what was to come. She had been given a chance at life, but survival would require more than just breathing. She would have to become something entirely new, neither fully white nor Apache, but something in between. Like the blanket now warming her shoulders, she would have to weave herself into the fabric of this new world. Black Horse watched it all with unreadable eyes, but his hand never left her back. In that touch lay everything unsaid between them. Promise and warning, protection and possession. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of dawn, but some shadows would remain. They had won this first battle, but the war for survival was just beginning. Blood dripped from Sarah's hands onto the clay pot she was learning to make, each crimson drop a testament to her determination. The rough clay had torn her soft palms. Raw, but she refused to stop. Around her, the Apache women watched with a mixture of curiosity and growing respect. She had been at it since dawn, failing again and again, but never once complaining. "Your hands are too soft, Grey Dove," Black Horse's sister said in halting English, "like a child's." There was no mockery in her voice, only statement of fact. She reached down, taking Sarah's bleeding hands in her own calloused ones. "But they will learn, like your heart must learn." Sarah watched as Grey Dove demonstrated the technique again, her skilled fingers coaxing the clay into perfect submission. The older woman's hands told a story of survival, each scar, each hardened patch, speaking of years of labor and determination. These were the hands that built life in the desert, that turned nothing into something, death into survival. The clay remembers, Grey Dove continued, switching to Apache. Though Sarah understood only a few words, the meaning flowed through the movement of Grey Dove's hands. "It remembers every touch, every intention. Make it with fear, it breaks. Make it with strength." The pot took shape, like magic beneath her fingers. From across the camp, Sarah felt Black Horse's eyes on her. He stood with his warriors, preparing for a hunt, but his attention kept straying to her lessons. Their gazes met briefly, and something electric passed between them. Since that first night in the canyon, they had barely spoken, yet something profound was growing in the silence. A sharp pain brought Sarah's attention back to her work. Blood welled from a new cut, but this time she smiled. Each wound was a lesson. Each scar would be a story. She bent back to her task, letting the rhythm of creation flow through her aching hands. "Look," whispered one of the younger women in Apache. "She bleeds, but she does not cry." The words carried to where Stonecatcher, one of the tribal elders, sat watching with hawkish eyes. The old woman had opposed Sarah's presence from the start, seeing her as a threat to their way of life. Now she watched as this white woman's blood mixed with the sacred clay of their ancestors. "Blood means nothing," Stonecatcher spat. "The Clay may accept her offering, but her spirit remains white. She will bring death to us all. Grey Dove's hands stilled on her own pot. The spirits guide Black Horse's heart, she answered calmly. Would you question their wisdom? The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. The women stopped their work, watching the confrontation unfold. Sarah might not understand all the words, but she felt the weight of this moment. Her hands kept moving, steady despite the pain. Stonecatcher rose, her ancient frame straight as a lance. I question the wisdom of a warrior who thinks with his loins instead of his head. This white snake will strike when we least expect it. Her kind always do. The words had barely left her mouth when Black Horse materialized between them, silent as a shadow and twice as dangerous. His presence sent a ripple of tension through the gathering. He said nothing, but his hand rested casually on his knife, a gesture that spoke volumes. "My brother," Grey Dove said softly, "the Old One speaks from fear, not wisdom." Sarah stood slowly, her bloody hands cradling the imperfect pot she had created. With deliberate care, she walked to Stonecatcher and held out her creation. The old woman's eyes widened at this unexpected gesture. "I bleed into your clay," Sarah said in careful Apache, words she had practiced in secret. "I learn your ways. I am not here to destroy. I am here to become." A profound silence fell over the camp. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Stonecatcher stared at the offered pot, at the blood-marked clay that dared to bridge two worlds. Slowly, her weathered hands reached out. The pot passed between them like a peace offering, like a promise. Stonecatcher's fingers traced the uneven edges, reading the story of Sarah's struggle in every flaw and triumph. Finally, she looked up, her ancient eyes boring into Sarah's soul. "The clay accepts you," she said in perfect English, shocking everyone present. "But the true test is yet to come. Pray you are strong enough when it does." Black Horse's hand had never left his knife, but now tension bled from his shoulders. He looked at Sarah with something like pride, though his warrior's face revealed nothing to the casual observer. She had passed this test, but Stonecatcher was right. Greater challenges lay ahead. Sarah's hands throbbed with honest pain, and her heart beat with honest fear. But as she met Black Horse's gaze again, she felt something else growing stronger than both, a determination that ran deeper than blood, than clay, than the very earth beneath their feet. She would become something new here, something neither white nor Apache had seen before. The desert wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of coming change. In the distance, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, promising either destruction or renewal. Only time would tell which. The hunting knife felt foreign in Sarah's hand, its bone handle smooth from generations of Apache warriors' grips. Black Horse had presented it to her at dawn, before the entire tribe, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The message was clear. Today she would prove her worth or die trying. 3 days, Running Bear had announced, his voice carrying across the hushed camp. 3 days alone in the desert. Return with a deer, or do not return at all. The challenge had come from Thunder Eyes, Black Horse's rival since childhood. "If she wants to be Apache," he had sneered, "let her hunt like Apache." The words were carefully chosen. Not a direct challenge to Black Horse's authority, but a test no warrior could refuse on behalf of one they protected. Now Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, the knife at her hip feeling heavier than any Bible she'd ever carried. The tribe had gathered to witness her departure, their faces unreadable in the purple light of dawn. Stonecatcher's words echoed in her mind, "The true test is yet to come." Black Horse stood apart from the others, his face carved from stone. Protocol demanded he stay behind. This was her trial alone. But when he'd handed her the knife, his fingers had brushed hers for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and in that touch she'd felt everything he couldn't say. "The knife remembers," he had whispered in Apache, words meant for her alone. "It knows the way home." Sarah took her first step away from camp, then another. She didn't look back. though every fiber of her being yearned to see Black Horse won. Last time. The sun rose behind her like a ball of fire, casting her shadow long across the desert floor, a shadow that seemed to stretch between two worlds. Thunder Eye's voice carried on the morning wind. The coyotes will grow fat on white. Flesh today. Sarah's hand tightened on the knife's handle, but she kept walking. She had learned enough Apache to understand the mockery and enough of their ways to know that responding would show weakness. Instead, she let the rising sun guide her into the desert's embrace, her moccasined feet silent on the harsh ground. The first day tested her body. The second day tested her mind. By the third day, Sarah understood that this trial was testing her very soul. The desert had stripped away everything she thought she knew about survival, about herself. The knife at her hip had become more than a weapon. It was a lifeline, a connection to the man who had saved her and the people she desperately wanted to call her own. She had tracked a deer since dawn, following signs Black Horse had taught her to read in their brief moments together. Blood from her cracked lips dripped onto the parched earth, but she barely noticed. The deer's tracks were getting fresher. It was close. The animal appeared like a spirit through the heat waves. A young buck, strong but not too large for her to handle. Sarah's world narrowed to this moment, to the space between heartbeats. The knife seemed to sing in her hand, calling for blood. Everything Black Horse had whispered to her in stolen moments came rushing back. The way to approach, the angle of attack, the sacred words to thank the spirit of the prey. Her feet moved without conscious thought, her body becoming one with the desert's rhythm. The buck sensed her too late. The knife flew true, finding its mark with devastating precision. Blood bloomed like a red flower in the desert sand. Sarah completed the ritual exactly as she had been taught, honoring the animal's sacrifice with Apache words that no longer felt foreign on her tongue. As she worked, a lone hawk circled overhead, the same hawk that had marked her first day in the tribe, a sign she knew now that the spirits were watching. The sun was setting when she walked back into camp, the deer's carcass across her shoulders. Blood had dried on her face like war paint, and her eyes held a wildness that made even the warriors step back. She walked past Thunder Eyes without sparing him a glance, past the murmuring women and wide-eyed children, past Running Bear's approving nod. She stopped only when she reached Black Horse. Their eyes met, and in that moment the whole camp fell away. She was no longer the weak white woman they had expected to die. She was something new, something forged in the desert's crucible. Without a word, she laid the deer at Black Horse's feet. Then she drew the knife, its blade still stained with her triumph, and offered it back to him, handle first. His fingers closed over hers, and this time neither of them tried to hide the electricity of that touch. "The knife remembers," she said in clear Apache, her voice carrying to every ear in the camp. "And so do I." Black Horse's face remained impassive, but his eyes blazed with something that made the watching warriors shift uncomfortably. Pride. Yes, but something more. Something that would change both their worlds forever. Thunder Eyes spat in the dust and stalked away, but his gesture of defiance felt hollow now. Sarah had done more than kill a deer. She had killed the weakness they expected to find in her. In its place, she had become something that demanded respect. Not white, not yet fully Apache, but something powerful enough to bridge both worlds. The knife had come home, and so had she. Time flowed like water through Sarah's fingers as summer gave way to autumn. With each passing day, she shed another layer of her old self, like a snake discarding its skin. Her hands grew calloused from work, her skin bronzed by the relentless sun. But it was the changes inside that marked her true transformation. Around her neck hung a beaded necklace she had crafted herself, each bead a testament to her growing mastery of Apache arts. The women had taught her their secrets, not freely at first, but with growing acceptance as she proved herself again and again. The necklace caught the light as she worked, its patterns telling a story of belonging that grew stronger with each passing day. Black Horse watched her from across the camp, his dark eyes following her movements with an intensity that made the air between them crackle like lightning. They rarely spoke, but their silence held more meaning than any words could carry. The whole tribe could feel it, the growing tension between their fearsome war chief and the white woman who was no longer truly white. "He burns for you," Grey Dove said one evening as they worked together, stripping meat from a fresh kill. "Like the sun burns the earth," Sarah's hands stilled on the bloody knife. "And the tribe burns with anger because of it," she replied in Apache that now flowed smoothly from her tongue. Grey Dove laughed, a sound like wind through canyon walls. "The tribe fears change, but change comes anyway, like winter follows summer." She touched the beaded necklace at Sarah's throat. "You wear our ways well, pale sister, perhaps too well for some." As if summoned by her words, Thunder Eyes stalked past their working area, his face dark with barely contained rage. Since Sarah's triumph with the deer, his challenges had become more subtle, but no less dangerous. He whispered poison in the ears of other warriors, speaking of tradition and the anger of the spirits. But Sarah was no longer the frightened woman who had stumbled out of the desert. She met his glare with steady eyes, her bloody hands never pausing in their work. She had learned that strength came in many forms, and silence could cut deeper than any knife. That night, as the camp settled into darkness, Sarah felt a presence behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was Black Horse. Her body hummed with awareness of him, like a compass needle finding true north. "Walk with me," he said softly in Apache. They moved away from the camp in silence, their footsteps matching rhythm without conscious thought. The desert night enfolded them in star-studded darkness, offering the illusion of privacy. When they reached a cluster of ancient rocks, Black Horse stopped. "The council meets tomorrow," he said, his deep voice carrying undertones of tension. She had learned to read. "They will decide your fate." Sarah's hand went to her beaded necklace, finding strength in its familiar weight. "My fate was decided the day you found me in the desert." He turned to her then, and the look in his eyes stole her breath. Moonlight carved his features in silver and shadow, making him appear more spirit than man. His hand rose, fingers hovering, just above her cheek without touching. "I am War Chief," he said, each word weighted with unspoken meaning. "I take what I want, but this—" His hand dropped to her necklace, grazing the skin beneath. "This must be given freely." Sarah felt the tremor that ran through his powerful frame, felt the iron control that kept him from pulling her closer. This warrior who could kill without hesitation, who commanded with absolute authority, was letting her choose. The moment stretched between them like a bowstring drawn taut. In the distance, a wolf howled, a lonely sound that echoed the yearning in their hearts. Sarah knew what accepting him would mean. The tribe might tolerate her presence, but taking their war, chief as her man, would set fire to a powder keg of resentment and tradition. Yet as she stood there, breathing in his scent of leather and sage, feeling the heat of his body like a promise in the cool night air, Sarah realized some fires were worth the burning. She had not survived fever, betrayal, and the desert's trials. To cower from this, her hand rose to his chest, feeling the thundering of his heart beneath her palm. The beads of her necklace caught the moonlight, throwing patterns across his skin like stars falling to earth. In that touch, she felt the future, shifting, realigning itself around this moment. "Some things," she whispered in his language, "are worth more than tradition." The sound he made was more animal than human. His control, legendary among the tribe, cracked like desert earth in drought, but still he held back, waiting for her final choice, offering her this last chance to turn away. Sarah Mitchell had died. In the desert, what remained was something new, something that burned as fierce and wild as the warrior before her. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in answer to all his unspoken questions. The stars wheeled overhead, bearing witness to a moment that would change the destiny of two peoples. Neither of them saw the shadow that slipped away from behind. The rocks, or knew that Thunder Eyes now had the weapon he had been waiting for. The council fire burned like a living thing, casting writhing shadows across faces carved from stone and prejudice. Sarah stood before the tribal elders, her heart thundering in her chest, but her spine straight as a warrior's lance. At her wrist, a silver and leather marriage bracelet caught the firelight. Black Horse's mother's bracelet, passed down through generations of Apache women. Its weight felt like destiny. Thunder Eye's voice cut through the night air like a poisoned arrow. She wears our sacred things, like a child playing dress-up. She wraps our war chief around her pale fingers like a snake. Will we let this white witch destroy everything our ancestors built? The words hung in the smoke-thick air. Sarah felt Black Horse tense beside her, his body coiled like a mountain lion ready to strike. But this was her battle to fight. "I wear your ways," she said in clear, strong Apache, "not as a costume, but as my skin. I bleed your blood, dream your dreams, fight your fights." Her hand touched the marriage bracelet. "I love as your women love, with every breath, every heartbeat, every dawn." Running Bear rose from his place at the council fire, his ancient face unreadable in the dancing light. "Love." He spat the word like a curse. "Love does not wash away generations of blood spilled between our peoples. Love does not erase the memories of children torn from mothers' arms, of villages burned, of treaties broken." "No," Sarah agreed, her voice carrying to every corner of the gathering. "Love does not erase the past, but it can build the future." Stonecatcher laughed, a harsh, cutting sound. "What future? One where our proud warriors breed pale-skinned children? Where our ancient ways dissolve like morning mist?" Black Horse stepped forward then, his presence commanding immediate silence. The firelight painted war stripes across his face, making him look like a spirit of vengeance made flesh. "I have killed more enemies of the people than any warrior here. I have spilled white blood until it ran like rivers. But the spirit sent her to us. To me, would you question their wisdom?" Thunder Eyes moved like a striking snake. "The spirits, or your desire for white flesh?" He turned to the council, arms spread wide. "See how she has already weakened him. Our greatest warrior now speaks of spirits when he thinks with his. The word never left his mouth. Black Horse's hand closed around his throat with lethal precision. The camp went deadly silent. Every breath held, every heart stopped. One squeeze, and Thunder Eyes would join his ancestors. Enough! The command cracked like summer lightning. Running Bear stood, his medicine staff raised high. "Release him, Black Horse. Blood spilled in council taints the spirit's voice." Slowly, Black Horse's fingers unclenched. Thunder Eyes stumbled back, gasping, hatred burning in his eyes. Sarah moved then, removing the marriage bracelet from her wrist. The silver caught the firelight one last time as she held it out to Running Bear. "My life was forfeit in the desert. Black Horse gave it back to me. Everything I am now, I choose to be, but I will not be the cause of division among the people. If the council says I must go, I will go." The bracelet dangled between them like a question. Running Bear's ancient eyes studied her face, reading. The truth written there. After what felt like eternity, he spoke. "When I was a boy, my grandmother told me of a prophecy. She spoke of a time when the wolf and the deer would drink from the same stream, when ancient enemies would forge new paths." He took the bracelet from Sarah's trembling fingers. "I did not understand then. Perhaps I do now." He turned to face the gathered tribe. "The world is changing around us, like wind reshapes the desert. We can stand rigid like dead trees until we break, or we can bend, grow, become stronger." His gaze swept the circle. "Black Horse brings us not just a bride, but a bridge. The spirits have shown their will. Who are we to deny them?" With movements made elegant by decades of ceremony, Running Bear returned the bracelet to Sarah's wrist, but he did not let go immediately. Instead, he pressed something else into her palm, a small medicine pouch, ancient and powerful. "Welcome to the people," he said softly. "May your children carry the strength of both worlds in their hearts." The council fire crackled and spat, sending sparks spiraling up to join the stars. Sarah felt Black Horse's hand find hers, felt the future crystallizing around them like morning frost. But in the shadows beyond the firelight, Thunder Eye's face promised that this victory had come with a price. Some fires once lit burn until they consume everything in their path. Dawn painted the desert blood red on the morning of the ceremony. Sarah stood in Grey Dove's lodge as skilled hands worked to transform her into an Apache bride. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of two worlds, buckskin as soft as sin, adorned with intricate beadwork that told the story of her journey from death to life, from white to Apache, from lost to found. "The spirits are restless today, Stone," Catcher murmured as she wove sacred eagle feathers into Sarah's hair. The old woman's acceptance had come at a price. She now treated Sarah as a vessel of prophecy, something both blessed and cursed. "They dance between worlds, as you do." Outside, the camp hummed with tension disguised as celebration. Warriors painted themselves for ceremony rather than war, but their eyes remained sharp, scanning the horizon for threats. Black Horse had doubled. The guards, he knew as well as any that their enemies would see this day as either an opportunity or an abomination. Thunder Eyes had disappeared 2 days ago, riding out alone despite the council's orders. "Hunting," he'd claimed, but every warrior knew hunting was not done in the days before a chief's wedding. His absence hung over the camp like a storm cloud promising lightning. "It is time," Grey Dove announced, stepping back to survey her work. The women fell silent, taking in the sight of their war chief's chosen bride. Sarah caught her reflection in a polished silver plate, a wedding gift from a Mexican trader. The woman who stared back was neither white nor Apache, but something new, something dangerous, something beautiful. Her mother's Bible was tucked into a beaded pouch at her hip, while Running Bear's medicine bag hung at her throat. Two kinds of power. Two kinds of protection. The ceremony ground had been prepared with ritual precision. 4 sacred arrows marked the cardinal directions, their fletching dyed with colors representing the elements. Black Horse waited at the center, magnificent in his war chief's regalia. Their eyes met across the space and the world seemed to hold its breath. Running Bear's voice carried across the gathered tribe. "Today, we witness more than a marriage. We witness a bridge being built between worlds. The spirits themselves have blessed this union, but blessings can become curses if the price is not paid in full." Sarah walked the ceremonial path alone, each step burning with meaning. The tribe watched in silence as she approached their war chief, their eyes filled with emotions that ranged from awe to barely concealed hatred. Every step carried her further, from her old life, closer to a future no one had dared imagine. Black Horse's hand reached for hers, and the moment their fingers touched, a wind whipped through the camp, scattering embers from the sacred fire. Some gasped, seeing it as an omen. But Sarah felt only the electric current that had sparked between them since that first desperate day in the desert. "I claim you," Black Horse said in Apache, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. "Before the spirits, before the people, before all worlds that watch, I choose you." Sarah responded in the same tongue, her words ringing with clear conviction. "Before your gods and mine, before all that was and all that will be." Running Bear raised his medicine staff, beginning the ancient words that would bind them together. But before he could finish the first phrase, a cry split the air. "Riders!" The word shattered the ceremony like a stone through glass. Warriors reached for weapons as women grabbed children. Through the chaos, Sarah felt Black Horse's hand tighten on hers, refusing to let go even as his other hand found his knife. Through the swirling dust, figures emerged on horseback. Not the blue-coated soldiers they'd feared, but Apache raiders, from a rival band. At their head rode Thunder Eyes, his face twisted in triumphant hatred. "I bring wedding guests, my chief," he called out, his voice dripping with venom. "The Grey Mountain Band wishes to—" congratulate you on taking a white bride." The leader of the Grey Mountain warriors spat on the ground. Black Horse grows weak, taking a pale-faced woman to his bed. Perhaps it is time for a stronger chief to lead the people. Sarah felt Black Horse's body coil like a spring, felt the rage emanating from him in waves. But before he could move, she stepped forward, still resplendent in her wedding dress. "I am not the weakness you think I am," she declared in perfect Apache, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. "I am the strength of two worlds combined, and any man who doubts that can face me here and now." The wedding dress shifted with her movement, revealing the knife strapped to her thigh, the same knife that had killed her first deer, that had proven her worth to the tribe. Her hand didn't move toward it, but the threat was clear. Black Horse's laugh was sudden and fierce, the sound of a warrior proud of his chosen mate. The Grey Mountain Raiders shifted uneasily in their saddles, unprepared for this white woman who spoke like an Apache and carried herself like a war chief's wife. Thunder Eye's face twisted with fury at seeing his plan backfire, but he had set forces in motion that could not be stopped. Blood would flow before this day was done, and the desert itself would bear witness to the price of breaking ancient ways. Blood and dust stained Sarah's wedding dress as she crouched behind the council lodge, pressing a ragged cloth against Grey Dove's wounded shoulder. The arrow had missed its lethal mark, but the message was clear. The Grey Mountain Band didn't care who they hurt in their quest for dominance. In her hands, she clutched a weathered map stolen from a dead cavalry scout, a map that showed the true reason for Thunder Eye's treachery. Blue marks indicated soldier camps, red marks showed planned settlement sites, and there in the middle, marked for destruction, was their home. "They come," Grey Dove whispered through pain-clenched teeth. "Not just the Grey Mountain dogs, but the bluecoats too. Thunder Eyes has sold us to both sides." Outside, war cries split the air as Black Horse's warriors engaged the raiders. The sound of gunfire, strange and terrible among the traditional weapons, confirmed their worst fears. The Grey Mountain Band had traded with white merchants for rifles breaking sacred laws. "Your man fights like a demon." Grey Dove managed a weak smile, her eyes fixed on the battle beyond the lodge. "But even demons can fall." Sarah's hands never stopped working on the wound as her mind raced. Black Horse was the greatest warrior the tribe had ever known, but even he couldn't fight a war on two fronts. The cavalry would come with their cannons and repeating rifles, and behind them would come the settlers with their plows and fences and laws. A shadow fell across them. Thunder Eyes, his face twisted in a mockery of triumph. "See how your choices poison us all, white woman. The chief's woman should be tending his wounds, not hiding with the weak." Sarah rose slowly, letting him see the bloody knife in her hand, not a weapon, but the tool she'd been using to treat. "Grey Dove, you speak of poison?" Her voice carried the deadly calm she'd learned from Black Horse. "You who run to our enemies with your mouth full of lies? Who bring guns among a people who still honor the old ways?" "The old ways," Thunder Eyes spat. "The old ways are dead. Black Horse is too blind to see it, too proud to adapt. The Bluecoats offer peace if we help them clear the territory of the other bands. The Grey Mountain Chief offers alliance through his daughter's hand. Instead, our mighty war chief warms his bed with pale-faced death. And what do they offer you?" Sarah's words cut like winter wind. "A chance to be chief? A few coins? A pat on the head from your new masters?" His hand shot out, fingers closing around her throat. But Sarah had learned more than just words from her time among the Apache. The knife moved without conscious thought, opening a line of red across his chest, not deep enough to kill, but enough to make him stumble back in shock. "I learned the old ways," she said, advancing on him. "I learned them with my blood and sweat. And tears. What have you learned from your new friends except treachery?" A war cry shattered the moment. Black Horse's voice, calling his warriors to him. Thunder Eye's face contorted with rage and fear. "It doesn't matter," he snarled. "The soldiers come. The settlers come. Change comes. Your death will be the spark that lights the fire." He turned to flee, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "You're right about one thing. Change comes, but not the way you think." She snatched up the map, letting him see it clearly. "The blue coats betrayed you already. They deal with the grey mountain band too, promising them the same things. You're not an ally, you're a tool, and tools get discarded." Doubt flickered in Thunder Eye's face as his eyes traced the map's markings. The evidence of his own manipulation was written there in blue and red lines. The cavalry's plans to pit the Apache bands against each other, then sweep in to claim the territory once they'd weakened themselves with fighting. A horn blew in the distance. 3 sharp blasts. The grey mountain raiders were pulling back. Thunder Eyes stood frozen, caught between his hatred and the brutal truth Sarah had shown him. "Choose now," Sarah said, pressing the bloody knife into his hands. "Die for their lies or live for your people's truth." The sound of hoofbeats grew closer, Black Horse returning from the fight. Thunder Eyes looked at the knife, at the map, at the woman who had become more Apache than he was. In that moment, the future balanced on a knife's edge, and the weight of his choice would echo through all their lives like thunder through canyon walls. The letter arrived with the dawn, carried by a half-dead Mexican trader who'd been paid in gold to deliver it. Sarah's hands trembled as she recognized the handwriting. Martha Jenkins, the woman who had helped strip her home bare and leave her for dead. "Dearest Sarah," the letter read, its false sweetness dripping like poison. "We were so relieved to hear you're alive, living among the savages. Your property remains in our safekeeping. Return to us, denounce the Apache, and all will be forgiven. The army promises safe passage. Refuse, and I fear what necessity will force them to do." Black Horse watched her face as she read, reading. The storm of emotions there, like he would read tracks in the desert. "They think they own you still," he said softly in Apache. "Like they think they own the earth and sky." Sarah crushed the letter in her fist. Through the lodge's entrance, she could see Thomas Jenkins and 3 other men from her old life, waiting at the edge of Apache territory under a white flag. They looked small and pale, like cave fish that had never seen the sun. "They own nothing," she answered in the same tongue, her voice hard as desert stone. "Not me, not this land, not even their own honor." But the sight of them had awakened something she thought long buried. Memories of Sunday socials, of civilized dinners, of a world where she had once belonged. The woman she had been whispered from that past, asking impossible questions about choice and belonging. "The bluecoats mass in the valleys," Thunder Eyes reported, entering the lodge without ceremony. His betrayal had been replaced by a bitter loyalty, born of the truth Sarah had shown him. They wait for her answer before they attack. Sarah felt the weight of the tribe's future pressing down on her shoulders. The settlers wanted her as a symbol, proof that the Apache could be broken, that civilization would triumph over savagery. Her refusal would give them the excuse they needed to attack. "If I go to them," she began. "No." Black Horse's voice cracked like a whip. He stepped close, his presence filling the lodge like storm clouds. "You are my woman, Apache woman. They will not take you." Sarah laid her hand on his chest, feeling the war drum of his heart. "My love," she said, the Apache words rich with meaning. "Sometimes the greatest victory comes from the deepest wound." A commotion outside interrupted them. Grey Dove burst into the lodge, her eyes wild. "The settlers, they bring something from before." Sarah followed her out into the harsh sunlight. Her heart stopped. There, held aloft by Thomas Jenkins like a battle standard, was her mother's old cross-stitched sampler. The one thing they hadn't stolen, the one thing she thought lost forever. "Your mother made this," Jenkins called out, his voice carrying across the divide. "Remember who you are, Sarah Mitchell. Remember your own kind." The sight of her mother's careful stitching, the prayers and promises sewn into every thread, hit Sarah like a physical blow. Black Horse's hand found hers, anchoring her to the present. They use your heart against you, he growled, like coyotes, using a wounded deer to lure its mate. But Sarah's eyes had caught something else. Behind the settlers, dust clouds rose on the horizon, cavalry troops moving into position. The sampler wasn't just a reminder of her past. It was a timer counting down to an attack. She straightened her spine, letting her Apache dress catch the sunlight. Let them see what she had become. Let them understand that their Sarah Mitchell was as dead as the woman who had stitched that sampler. "They don't want me back," she said, her voice carrying to both her old people and her new. "They want what my return would mean, the breaking of the Apache, the victory of their God over our spirits, the end of everything we are." Thunder Eyes moved to stand beside them, his face dark with understanding. "Then let them come. Let them learn that some things cannot be broken." The wind shifted, bringing the smell of soldier coffee and gun oil. Soon the hills would echo with war cries and rifle fire. But in this moment, Sarah felt the power of her position between two worlds. She was no longer the weak link they thought to exploit. She was the blade that would cut through their plans. "Tell them," she commanded Thunder Eyes in English. "Tell them Sarah Mitchell died in the desert. Tell them Black Horse's woman sends them back to their masters with a warning. Any man who crosses our boundaries will feed the vultures." The settlers' faces twisted with shock and rage as Thunder Eyes translated. The sampler slipped from Jenkins' fingers, falling to the dust like a discarded life. Behind them, the cavalry. Troops began to move. The sun hung like a copper shield in the blood-red sky as Sarah stood in the neutral ground between two armies. Behind her, Black Horse and his warriors waited, their faces painted for war, their weapons hungry for blood. Before her, the United States cavalry sat astride their mounts, brass buttons gleaming, rifles at the ready. And there, between the lines, Thomas Jenkins held aloft a white flag of truce. Colonel Harrison Maxwell, the man who'd orchestrated this confrontation, urged his horse forward. His handlebar moustache twitched with barely concealed disdain as he looked down at her. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, emphasizing her former name like a weapon, "your presence here offers us a unique opportunity to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Return to your people. Testify that these savages kidnapped you, and the army will show mercy." Sarah felt, rather than saw, Black Horse tense behind her. The weight of hundreds of eyes pressed down on her, bluecoats, settlers, and Apache warriors all, waiting to see what this woman caught between worlds would choose. "My people," Sarah's voice carried across the battlefield, clear and strong. "Look at me, Colonel. Look closely." She stood proud in her Apache dress, adorned with beadwork that told the story of her transformation. But more than her clothing had changed. The woman who had stumbled dying in the desert was gone, replaced by someone who moved like a warrior, who spoke with the authority of a chief's wife, who carried herself with the dignity of both worlds. "The woman you seek died in the desert," she continued. "The people you call savages gave me new life, new purpose, new love. I make my choice freely, before all these witnesses." "Love?" Jenkins spat the word. "You speak of love while sleeping with the murderer of white women and children? And how many Apache women and children have your bluecoats murdered?" Sarah's words cut like knives. "How many broken treaties litter the trail behind you? At least the Apache fight their battles openly, not with false smiles and poisoned promises." The white flag trembled in Jenkins' hands. "Martha saved your mother's sampler," he tried one last time. "Your history—" "My history?" Sarah laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. "My history is written in the sand where you left me, to die. My future." She turned to look at Black Horse, their eyes meeting across the space between armies. "My future is written in the stars that guided me home." Colonel Maxwell's face hardened. "Then you leave us no choice. When we attack, you'll die with them." "If you attack," Sarah's voice dropped to a deadly whisper that nevertheless carried to every ear. "You'll find that I've learned more than just Apache ways. I've learned their secrets. Every waterhole you count on, poisoned. Every canyon you plan to use, trapped. Every native scout you hired, loyal to us." The colonel's horse shifted nervously under him, sensing its rider's unease. Sarah pressed her advantage. "Look around you, Colonel. You're surrounded by ghosts, Apache warriors, who've fought in these lands since before your grandfather was born. They know every rock, every shadow, every way to kill a man without him ever seeing their face." Thunder Eyes materialized beside her, his previous betrayal transformed into fierce loyalty. He translated her words into Apache, and war cries erupted. From unseen warriors in the hills, the cavalry horses startled, some soldiers struggling to maintain control. "I make you this offer," Sarah declared. "Retreat. Tell your superiors that this territory is protected, not by savages, but by people who understand this land in ways you never will. Return with arms, and none of you will leave alive." The colonel's hand strayed toward his pistol. In that same instant, Black Horse's bow creaked with deadly promise, an arrow aimed at the officer's heart. One twitch would unleash hell. Sarah turned deliberately away from the colonel, walking back toward her chosen people. Each step felt like destiny, like the weight of two worlds balancing on the edge of her decision. Behind her she heard the colonel curse, heard the creak of saddle leather as he wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over," he shouted at her back. Sarah stopped but didn't turn. "You're right, Colonel. This is just the beginning. Spread the word. The woman you knew as Sarah Mitchell stands with the Apache, and we will not be moved." She reached Black Horse's side, felt his hand find hers. Together they watched as the cavalry slowly withdrew, their blue coats disappearing into the desert haze, like a bad dream fading in the morning light. But even as the immediate threat receded, Sarah felt the weight of what was to come. This was no ending. It was a declaration of war, and she had just become its central figure, a bridge transformed into a battlefield, a woman whose choice would echo through the years like thunder through these ancient canyons. The first attack came 3 days later as the moon hung pregnant and full in the desert sky. Not from the cavalry. They were still licking their wounds and plotting, but from the grey mountain band, thinking to curry favor with the bluecoats by striking first. Sarah crouched beside Black Horse in the shadows of their sentry position, watching the enemy warriors slip through the canyon below like oil on water. Her hand rested on the knife at her hip, while his fingers caressed his bowstring with a lover's touch. "They think us weak," he whispered in Apache, his breath warm against her ear. "They think my white woman has made me soft." A wry smile touched Sarah's lips. "Let them think it. The fox kills best when the rabbit believes it's sleeping." The attack was brutally swift. Black Horse's warriors fell upon the grey mountain band. Like wolves on sheep, their knowledge of the terrain turning the canyon into a killing ground. Sarah moved among the wounded afterward, her hands steady as she worked, her mother's teachings of mercy blending with Apache healing ways. The captured Grey Mountain war chief knelt before them, bound but unbowed. His eyes burned with hate as they fixed on Sarah. "You pollute our bloodlines with your white witch," he spat at Black Horse. "The spirits will curse your seed." In answer, Sarah drew a small clay pot from her medicine bag. The tribal marks on it proclaimed its origin. Grey. Mountain make captured in a raid years ago. "Your own mother made this pot," she said in perfect Apache. "I learned its story from the patterns. I learned your ways, learned to respect them. But you—" She let the pot drop, shattering on the rocks. "You break your own traditions by dealing with those who would destroy us all." She pressed the shards into his hands. "Go back to your people. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them how Black Horse's white woman knows their craft, honors their ways, while their own chief sells them to the bluecoats for empty promises." Thunder Eyes, standing guard nearby, barked a harsh laugh. "I told them the same thing once, before I learned the taste of my own fool's medicine. The war chief's fingers closed around the broken pottery, blood welling where the sharp edges cut his palm. Something shifted in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, of a truth he'd been refusing to see. But there was no time to press the advantage. A scout burst into the camp, his horse lathered with effort. "Riders, many riders, the blue coats come with cannon." Black Horse was moving before the words faded, shouting orders that sent the camp into controlled chaos. Sarah felt her heart tear as she watched mothers bundling children onto horses, old ones gathering sacred items, warriors preparing for what might be their final battle. "You know what must be done," Black Horse said, turning to her. His face was painted for war, but his eyes held the same fire that had drawn her from the beginning. Sarah nodded. They had prepared for this, had known it would come. While the tribe scattered to their prepared positions in the high country, she would lead a smaller group to execute a desperate plan. She mounted her horse, feeling the weight of responsibility, settle around her shoulders like a familiar blanket. Thunder Eyes and 5 other warriors would ride with her, once enemies, now bound by a common cause. "If we fail," Thunder Eyes said quietly, "the people die." "Then we don't fail," Sarah replied, her voice hard as desert stone. Black Horse caught her reins before she could ride out, pulling her close. Their kiss tasted of war paint and destiny. "Return to me," he commanded. "Always," she promised, the word carrying the weight of 2 worlds in its syllables. They parted ways as the first light of dawn painted the sky. Black Horse leading the tribe to safety, Sarah riding toward danger. In her saddlebag, carefully wrapped in leather, lay their last hope, a peace pipe, its stone bowl carved with symbols from both Apache and white traditions. But this was no ordinary pipe of peace. Like Sarah herself, it held secrets that would change the shape of the coming battle. The thunder of cavalry hooves echoed through the canyons behind them. The game was on, and the stakes were nothing less than survival itself. Sarah touched the medicine bag at her throat, feeling the power of both her worlds pulsing within it. Before this day was done, blood would soak the desert sand, and the true meaning of loyalty would be written in the savage language of war. The canyon walls loomed like ancient gods as Sarah led her small band through the shadow-strewn passages. Behind them, the cavalry's advanced scouts were falling into her trap, following the obvious trail she'd left. Before them lay the place where everything would change, a narrow gorge the Apache called the Spirit's Throat. The peace pipe bounced against her thigh with each stride of her horse, its dual language engravings telling a story of peace while concealing its true purpose. Inside the hollow stem, written in Sarah's careful hand on thin paper, was a document that could save or doom them all, a treaty, but not the kind the blue coats expected. "They follow," Thunder Eyes reported, materializing from his scouting position like a ghost. 20 riders moving fast. The main force with the cannon stays back, waiting for their signal. Sarah nodded, her face set like desert stone. "And our other guests?" "The Grey Mountain Chief keeps his word. His warriors wait in the high rocks. They've seen enough of blue coat treachery." The plan was audacious, born of Sarah's understanding of both worlds. While Black Horse led the cavalry to believe they were chasing the main tribe, she had orchestrated something unprecedented. A gathering of all the Apache bands who had suffered from broken treaties and blue coat lies. They reached the gorge. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, Sarah positioned her warriors with practiced precision, then drew out the peace pipe. Its surface caught the light like a promise. "Remember," she told them in Apache, "let them see only what they expect to see. A white woman gone native, seeking to broker peace. They'll be so busy watching for treachery from you, they won't see it coming from me." The cavalry scouts appeared at the gorge's mouth, led by a lieutenant whose fresh-pressed uniform marked him as new to frontier warfare. His eyes widened at the sight of Sarah, standing alone in the open with the pipe held high. "Mrs. Mitchell?" He urged his horse forward cautiously. "We've been searching for you." "I know what you've been searching for." Sarah replied, her English feeling strange after so long speaking Apache. A way to break us, a weakness to exploit. You've found neither. She held up the pipe. Instead, you've found something unexpected. A true path to peace, written in both our tongues, blessed by both our gods. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but she saw the greed there too. What glory would come to the young officer who succeeded where others had failed? You offer terms? He tried to mask his eagerness. I offer truth. Sarah's voice carried to every ear in the gorge. Come, share the pipe. Read the treaty it carries. Learn what real peace could look like. The soldiers dismounted, moving forward with the cautious step of men expecting ambush. Above them, hidden Apache warriors held their breath and their arrows, waiting for Sarah's signal. The lieutenant took the pipe, examined its craftsmanship with genuine admiration. Beautiful work, he admitted. Your husband's people are skilled. Artisans, my people, Sarah corrected firmly. I chose them and they chose me. That's what you've never understood. This isn't about force or submission, it's about respect. She caught movement at the corner of her eye, more riders appearing. At the gorge's entrance, Colonel Maxwell himself, leading the main force drawn by the scouts' reports of a possible treaty. Perfect. Sarah's hands remained steady as she helped the lieutenant open the pipe's stem, watching his face as he extracted not the expected peace, treaty, but detailed documents showing every betrayal, every broken promise, every secret deal the army had made with different bands. Maps marked with planned ambush sites, letters proving their intentions to pit Apache against Apache. What? The lieutenant's face drained of color as he recognized his commanding officer's signature. Now you understand, Sarah said, her voice carrying to where Maxwell sat frozen on his horse. You're not just facing one band today, you're facing all of us. As if summoned by her words, Apache warriors materialized on every ridge, every outcropping, not dozens, but hundreds. The Grey Mountain Band, the River People, every tribe that had suffered from blue coat duplicity, united for the first time in history. And there, on his black horse like a spirit of vengeance, rode Black Horse himself, leading the final wave of warriors to seal the trap. Maxwell's face purpled with rage. "Kill them all," he roared, raising his pistol. But before he could fire, another voice rang out, the Grey Mountain war chief, standing tall on his ridge. "No more," he shouted in clear English. "No more will you make us fight each other while you steal our lands." The colonel's head snapped around, taking in the full scope of his situation. Hundreds of Apache warriors on the high ground, his cavalry boxed in the narrow gorge. And at the center of it all, a white woman who had turned his own tactics against him. "You can't win," Sarah said quietly, but her voice carried like thunder. "But you can live. Drop your weapons, return to your fort, and take this message. The Apache bands are united now, with one voice, one purpose. The old game of divide and conquer is over." Maxwell's face worked through a range of emotions, rage, disbelief, and finally the beginning of understanding. His eyes met Sarah's, and she saw the moment he realized what she truly was, not just a white woman gone native, but something entirely new. A bridge between worlds, but one that would be crossed only with proper respect. The colonel slowly lowered his pistol. In that gesture, Sarah saw the future beginning to unfold. Not an easy peace, not a complete victory, but a chance for something different. Something that had never been possible before this moment. As the years flowed like water through the canyons, the story of the white woman who became Apache grew into legend. Around countless fires, mothers would touch the storyteller's necklace. A magnificent piece that combined Apache beadwork with Victorian cameos, and tell their children about the day death stalked the desert and found love instead. They would speak of Sarah, who came to them as weak as a spring fawn and grew strong as summer lightning, They told of Black Horse, the mightiest warrior who learned that the greatest strength sometimes lies in the power to change. Their love became a bridge between worlds, and their children carried the beauty of both in their blood. But it was more than just a love story. The day Sarah turned the Bluecoats' own tactics against them became a turning point in Apache history. The unity she helped forge between the bands held firm, creating a power that even Washington couldn't ignore. Where other tribes faced removal and reservation life, the united Apache nations maintained their sovereignty over vast territories. Thunder Eyes, once her bitterest enemy, became her strongest advocate. He would gather the young ones and show them the knife that had started it all, the one she'd used to kill her first deer, to prove her worth, to defend her new people. "See how the blade shines," he would say. "Like her spirit, it cuts through darkness to find truth." Black Horse and Sarah's Lodge became a place where both worlds could meet in peace. White traders learned to respect Apache ways, while Apache leaders learned to navigate the changing times without losing their essential nature. Their children grew up speaking both languages, walking in both worlds, carrying forward the bridge their parents had built. Stonecatcher lived to see her dire predictions proven wrong. Before she passed to the spirit world, she gave Sarah her most precious possession, a medicine bag that had been passed down through 10 generations of medicine women. "You are the future I could not see," the old woman admitted. "The change that saves rather than destroys." On the 10th anniversary of the day Black Horse found her in the desert, Sarah stood with him on the high cliffs overlooking their territory. Their eldest daughter wore the beaded necklace Sarah had made in those early days of proving herself. Their son carried his father's warrior spirit and his mother's gift for bridging divides. Around them, the tribe flourished, adapting to new ways while keeping the old ones strong. "Do you ever regret?" Black Horse asked her in Apache, his voice as powerful as ever, though silver now streaked his hair. "The life you left behind?" Sarah touched the dual-world necklace at her throat, the one that had become a symbol of her legacy, worn now by all who followed in her footsteps as peacemakers between peoples. "I regret nothing," she answered in the same tongue. "I died in the desert that day, and you gave me new life. Everything since has been a gift from the spirits." He took her hand, strong and calloused from years of working Apache crafts, yet still skilled in the writing of the white man's words. Together they watched the sun set over their land, not just Apache land or white man's territory, but something new, something that existed because a dying woman refused to die, and a warrior dared to defy tradition for love. Their legend lives on, carried in the intricate patterns of storyteller necklaces, in the songs sung around fires, in the peace that grew from the seeds of their courage. They say that on nights when the desert wind blows just right, you can hear their story in its whispers, the tale of how love proved stronger than hatred, how wisdom proved mightier than bullets, and how one woman's choice to embrace a new world, rather than fear, it changed the course of history. And if you look carefully in the old Apache territories, you might still find traces of their legacy, in the proud faces of their descendants, in the continuing strength of Apache traditions, and in the enduring truth that the greatest journeys of the heart begin when we dare to cross the boundaries others built to divide us. For in the end, Sarah and Black Horse's story became more than just a tale of survival or romance. It became a beacon, showing how the future is built, not by those who cling to the shore of the familiar, but by those who dare to swim into deep waters, trusting love to guide them home.